Hello, and a very warm welcome to Workshoppable, Episode 3. This week, we've got a first year from Cardiff University coming in to tell us all about their big novel idea. We'll be seeing just what they get up to in their spare time, what sort of thing they love to write, and what their ambitions are for the future. If you'd like to backtrack to a previous episode, luckily we have a YouTube channel at workshop-able on youtube.com. Thank you for joining me again, and I'll let you listen to the podcast. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Workshoppable podcast. It's been a little while because we've been on Christmas break, or at least I have been anyway, and eating way too much, so have not been able to move my chair to go and edit this podcast. It's week 3 this week, and for my guest this week, I have the acclaimed author, the incredibly prestigious Pip Pryor on the podcast, one of Cardiff University's very own. Pip, hello.
Hi.
I guess one of the first questions people have is, you're at Cardiff University. What course are you studying?
Quite predictably, I'm doing English literature and creative writing.
English literature and creative writing. It's extremely fitting. And in your own words, what sort of writing do you do? What sort of writing do you really, really enjoy?
Personally, I really like writing fantasy novels and any kind of writing where I can really get into a character's head and explore character relationships.
So lore, world building stuff, that's your forte.
Yeah, and then using that to then think about how would this impact a character on their day to day, or how would this impact a group culturally.
Yeah. So a lot of English lit modules are analysing. I know you have to analyse a lot of slow, boring stuff that you might not want to analyse before you get into the really juicy stuff. What sort of stuff do you do on your course? And is it stuff that you like doing?
Well, for the main English literature module last semester, it was critical reading and critical writing, which was there was Shakespeare, there was Wide Sargasso Sea. It was a lot of books which are really kind of culturally important, known in the literary canon. Books that I considered very fun to discuss, or very interesting to get into the meat of, but reading them is such a drag, because it's very kind of even when Shakespeare has jokes in it, it's you have to understand what he is saying. You have to constantly flick to the glossary at the bottom or back at the book, and it's just a lot of dry realism. Silas Marner, I really feel for Silas the character, but the book is so long and dry.
Yeah, when you need we had this lesson once, and we had a lesson to explain one of the puns in Shakespeare's Macbeth, and the teacher was actually it's really funny when you look at page 392, go to the dictionary, do a historical study, read the paper. And I'm yeah, but it's a little bit funny.
It's a punchline you have to do work for. It just isn't that fun.
It's not engaging at all.
Oh, it was I have to read. I was reading Pride and Prejudice for one of my modules this semester, Star-Crossed Lovers, because I was it's Jane Austen. I'm going to hate reading this. It's that kind of book. So I started reading it, and I was just no, this is really dry. And I told my dad I find this super boring and dry. And he was just oh no, you got to think it's funny. You got to think of it as a satire. And it's just even when I think of it as a satire, it's not a good satire. It's not funny. If I wanted people to go round to people's houses, have dinner parties, and mock each other, I would either watch Come Dine With Me, or I would just go to somebody's house myself.
Just go home, yeah.
I would just go home.
Just incite a family drama.
I would just go into the kitchen in my student accommodation to start roasting people.
Exactly, I just go downstairs. I've tried. I had a very, very boring period a few years ago where I tried to get into the classics, and it's like, oh, lady, blah blah blah, you're being, this man is propositioning you, oh, he's lovely, but he's so unsuitable, for God's sake. and then I mean, the authors I've talked to before on this podcast have had fantasy sci-fi stuff, and you can go anywhere, and you can make Pride and Prejudice better by just setting it in space or somewhere that's not like 18th, 19th century English.
You either add dragons or magic,
yeah,
or you make somebody gay.
That's
how you improve it instantly.
Exactly. Make Mr. Darcy gay and maybe Pride and Prejudice. I mean, you know, for the podcast, Catherine just did a wrist flick. Yeah. So sci-fi fantasy is your thing. You've written, I mean, we're both in Creative Writing Society, so I've heard a lot about your clown work in progress.
Oh, no.
It's not the extract you brought today, but how does your writing process work? Because I know you've got a lot of things that are started and that you want to continue.
It's like, I guess my so like the way I work with new ideas is quite annoying, because I'm very much a person who's very like, oh, I'll come up with all of these cool character ideas and cool little lore ideas and then not have much of a plot. And then like the reason like why it's taken so many iterations for me in like my main work in progress to have something I'm happy with is because I've had to like constantly write, so like make a story that's kind of like, my aim with it is to like eventually publish it, but it mostly started off as characters I had when I was like 13 and very much cringeworthy. So I've had to like make them like commercial, like be able to like accessible to like a public audience who isn't me.
Yeah.
And make a story that's followable. So like I've sort of like, and to use them to sort of like create a story and a world, and then I've had to go back to sort of like edit the characters, so therefore like work in the world and actually make sense and aren't like cringe. Aren't like both of my parents are dead, serial killer, every single traumatic thing that could ever happen to a character, have to axe all of that out.
So do you find you update them like as you get older? So like you have a character you start with at 13, and when you get to 14 you're like, oh, it's a bit cringe, and then add something on, and then as you get older you look at the character and go, oh, from a adult perspective now I'm looking at this character and I want to update them and build more lore onto them.
Yeah, because as I've grown up, I've sort of like found out that what I really like in books and creating characters myself is like, so like I like having a fantasy setting and being able to have the openness of that, but then I also like to have more realistic sort of like character interactions and sort of like the way they sort of like interact with the world and think so like psychologically. So like as I've grown up and I've been a pretty like introverted, like anxious person in my life, as I've become an adult I've become more independent and I've had more worldly experiences, and that's been able to like help me to make characters that are like more realistic and not like just like silly funny little characters I made when I was like 13 and like just did not understand how people worked.
Yeah. In terms of authors that you've grown up reading, are there any that you specifically take your style from, or not try to imitate, but base what you're doing off of, doing stuff on unconsciously? Well,
the aforementioned clown thing was literally that was my EPQ for A level. So that was all about writing something that was based off of Terry Pratchett's work.
Fantastic.
And even though like Terry Pratchett isn't like that super like super like in-depth psychological character study, it's like a lot of his like humor and like how he's able to have like really funny bits in his books, but like generally like really like moving and like serious lines, and combine those and have each of them be as powerful as each other. That's something that I saw like probably unconsciously like taken from doing that and used in my own work, because I think there's like I think this goes back to being 13 and having like cringe characters. Like there's this idea that like if you want a work to be taken seriously, it has to be super gritty. Like it has to make you like sob and cry, and it's just like that I found out just isn't fun for me. I need a work that both encompasses like sort of like tragedy, but also like positive emotions, because like the things that have made me cry the most in works of fiction are often like very happy moments, which come after like really like heavy moments. So like character death doesn't always make me cry, but like a really like heartfelt reunion after like tons of like hardship and all the characters are like crying and embracing, that gets to me.
Aww.
Maybe I'm soft, but like that just hits me harder.
Yeah. Okay, bit of a nerdy question. Out of Terry Pratchett's sort of series or worlds, if you will, I mean it's all one world, Discworld, but which series is your series if you had to pick one?
Oh, any of the Rincewind novels.
Oh my goodness!
I feel like the deaf ones are like sort of like the obvious answer, and I really like Death as a character because you know he have his like serious like voice and have like the energy he brings, this graveness he brings to each scene, but then like how he's just kind of a little bit goofy and he really likes cats.
Just a bit of a goofball. Goofy mood.
He's just in a quirky goofy mood. But then like I just like Rincewind because he's so like pathetic. He's so like cowardly and like I kind of and like bad at stuff, and like I see myself in him because he's not a perfect person. But then like I don't know, it's just he's really enjoyable to read about.
Yeah.
Flaws and all. Warts and all. And then like you know, he still ends up doing like good. And his relationship with like Two Flower, even though it starts off as like him just trying to take advantage of a tourist, it like blossoms into like just like an actually kind of like a wholesome friendship, and it's just nice to like see that. And I think it's just like I think with like the first two books, which are the ones I'm most familiar with, which is like The Colour and Magic and The Light Fantastic, which are both basically come after each other and are both Rincewind novels. I think that was sort of like Terry Pratchett more just exploring like magic and being quite goofy with it, rather than some of his other books where he tackles like bigger like social issues, which I think are like still really good. But there's something very charming about just how goofy and how sort of like he takes all of those fantasy tropes and just turns them on their head, and he just doesn't give any he just doesn't like give any cares about it at all.
So Terry Pratchett is sort of a writer who has a world and then adds more and more and more to the world. Is that the sort of thing you see yourself doing when you get your books published? Yeah,
because like originally when I was first creating my world, which is at the moment called Saluna, but is very subject to change, it was like very big, had all of this cool lore. There was like 14 gods and then 2 other gods on top of that, and then like another god who just kind of messed everything up. But like I've very and like big like epic this evil mage has like blown up the order of the mages, and then this guy who was always suspicious of him has to like go and, you know, connect all of like the heart pieces of this like one god who knew what happened, and then fight God or something. And it's like very much decreased in scale.
Yeah.
So I'm focusing on like this character, Sebastian, and then his relationship with his like family, and how his family has affected him because he's part of royalty, but then he lacks the ability to read the magic book, which is important and the royal family can do. So of course that causes lineage into question. Nobody really respects him. So that ties it into the law, and it becomes it's a much more like self-contained story about more of like a character study about him, and him sort of like realizing how messed up his and sort of like abusive and neglectful his family is, and then finding sort of like love elsewhere. But like then with the sort of like the idea of the books that the royal families have, I like that idea because then that lends itself to like, oh cool, like all the other royal families in this universe will have a book. I could like think about like how that impacts the other like different royal families. Like, do they have a different way of going about it? Like, what do the books actually say?
Multiple magic systems.
Systems.
My God.
Oh.
That gets me excited. Oh my goodness. So you're in the process of writing up the finished novels to hopefully hand to a publisher and get them properly published.
Yeah.
Is that something you want to do straight out of university, or are there a few things you want to do first?
I think like I would like to write the book as quickly. I mean, as quick as slow as it needs to be written well, and that's how many drafts it takes. Because I want, it's something. Maybe it's like a flaw of it, but it's something I love a lot. Like something that's like very important to me. Technically, like my magnum opus, just because of like the emotional like resonance it has with me. But then I think like in university, I want to maybe put my name out there a bit more before I try publishing it.
Yeah.
So I've thought about writing shorter pieces and submitting them to either like competitions or magazines.
So connections and people to talk to, and
expanding my worldview a bit. So like making people know who I am, because I know that like the longer a book is, the harder it is to publish. I'm not exactly sure how long this book is going to be, but it'd be nice to like, it's hard to publish a longer book if you're like a new writer. They don't know you.
Yeah.
So it's like good to, I want to like put my name out, so like have a bit more of like a reputation. Like, oh, Pip's trying to like publish this book. Oh, we've seen them before.
Yeah.
Oh, we love Pip. Pip's our friend.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I have like ideas for like other sort of like I have an idea for like a novel series which is like based on Earth, but then has like magical elements in it, which is based off of like, funnily enough, the original protagonist of my fantasy world, which is called Brian, which is who's the least magical name I could have given to a character, and his characterization was literally just British. So I was just like, what if I took him and just put him in Britain where he belongs? So I did that. So that's something I have on the back burner. I also have like another idea, which is kind of like for I get kind of like a podcast, like I guess in the vein of like the Magnus Archives and Welcome to Night Vale.
Yeah.
Where it's like they use the podcast format to then give that narrative. It's like about like two wizards making like a podcast which starts off with them like talking about these like famous like wizard criminals in their like society, but then it slowly turns out to be that like, oh, they're like in a really like bad like dictatorial like wizard society.
Wow.
It's like really bad to them, and you like slowly see all of the punishments for the criminals they discuss. Like slowly the crimes get like smaller and smaller in scale, but the punishments grow like disproportionately large, and you're like, I don't think it's right. That's another one.
That sounds incredible.
But because I've had this like main idea with like Sebastian for so long now, it's like I think I need to write it first, because I don't think I'll ever be able to write any other sort of like long form thing until like I drill a little hole into my head so these little fictional people can crawl out and finally leave me to rest.
it's the letting the little people go to the back of your brain for a while, so you can sell yourself a bit on sell yourself. Gosh, that sounds very fucking no. But yeah, basically getting your name out there, networking, it's really important, and it's hard to like get your name out there as well. And I've always gone to panels and stuff, and what publishers will tell you is it's luck, but you make the luck by just working and slogging and talking to people. And then it's not what you know, it's who you know, which is the line people say over and over and over again. So I usually ask this at the end, but since you are trying to get yourself out there as an author, is there anything you want to promote, or where we can follow you in the future for books / stories / things / podcasts?
Probably will make like a blog at some point. Funny enough, I deleted Twitter like
I think that's actually a good idea.
I deleted Twitter a few weeks ago because like so like it was making me like stressed out and my anxiety was getting bad. But at some point I will try to make a blog that I can have a portfolio on. It's like my goal is to like write books and stuff, but like I've been fairly like relaxed about it, so I don't really have like many like big like stuff set up right now. Apart from the ideas and a dream, but so like my goal in university is to A, get a degree, but B, set everything up, so like get my name out there, then you know, people can like find me.
So when people listen back to this podcast, they'll go, "Oh my god, it's them!" Like I know them in the future. I love their books.
Pip, I know Pip. I love Pip.
Pip, they're their biggest fan, and they did this podcast for their creative writing friend. Woo! Yeah. So Pip is working on their social media and working on promoting themselves, but the main place you can find them is in Cardiff, applying to lots of writing competitions maybe in the future, and working on a novel.
The main story is basically a sort of like romance kind of story with and sort of like character study / romance of like Sebastian, his relationship with his family, his inability to like do what's expected of him, like as part of a royal family, and then him finding sort of like love and a relationship in this like musician who's also kind of an activist who kind of really hates Sebastian's brother, so that's a big thing. His name is Blake, but the musician's called Blake because another thing I really like about writing is being able to like put in LGBT representation, which I might not be able to read, or it's just like the kind of like LGBT representation that I like to put in myself, like the one I like to see in the world. So that's sort of like the main story, but then I also have like a bunch of other characters I've developed which kind of feature in the story, but then but not much, but then they're like very developed, so I have the good thing about it is that I can always go in and like, oh, I want to write this character's storyline, like Romeo's wife is having an affair with another character, but this character's been really developed. I could write about them because that's interesting, and I could also write about Sebastian's past because that's very built up and very important to him. Blake as the love interest has like a lot of like interesting like why he became an activist, so like how he comes to his run-in with Sebastian's brother. Yeah, so like I mean, they sometimes say like, oh, don't get super attached to characters and don't make like a ton of characters you don't need. But like often, even if you can't fit all of them into the story, the benefit is that you have three characters you've developed. You can easily like look into them for like new like story ideas.
Yeah. And even if you don't end up writing side stories, or they might do, you've got exactly how they react in every situation, which is something a lot of writers struggle with. They have sort of templates online, like, oh, before you write character, what is your character's favourite food? What is your character's motivation? But if you already have them really well developed, like it gives you a sense of how rich and deep the characters really are. And even if they're not in it that much, they are real people.
Because I have a handful of characters which aren't human, which are they're of a species I've created called seers. It's sort of like have four eyes, unicorn horn, tail, come in a variety of funky colours. But their whole deal is that they were very close. Their like ancestors were very close to the god of Seluna, which I have whittled down the number from about 14 to a nice single 1. And
that's pretty good.
And then like different characters have different interpretations of the same god. But like I have this like species like seers who are like very, very close to this god in a way that humans in the world just aren't.
Yeah.
And there's one seer character who's like so like good friends with like Sebastian. But like, being a friend of Sebastian, he's not really that important to the story, but with him being a seer, there is so much I could explore with him in sort of like connection to what religion is like on this planet, the myths and the legends that they have of the god, and like how seers are treated in the world now, because the god isn't really around anymore. They've kind of like lost what sort of like made them really sort of like important in the world, and humans have kind of so like gained power and more importance in the world. So it's like how are they treated now? How does that affect his relationships with other people?
So there's one god who is very much real in your story, and in religion on this world, is it all like monotheistic, or are there some religions that think there are multiple gods?
The whole deal is there's this god, and they very much like they wrote so like a bunch of like books, and then somehow the royal families of the world each got one of these books, but like this god was also like blinded by another god who isn't really that important, but like in being blinded, they sort of like created seers to act as their like eyes and their scribes to help them like finish off the books. So that's why seers were so important to them. And then somehow the god disappeared. The books were handed to each came into possession of each of these like royal families. But like each book is like different, so that's created a different way that each royal family perceives how the god is. So like really there is only one god, but there is different interpretations of the god that each like royal family and kind of like whoever subscribes to that specific religion think is the real god. So they're all fighting over like what this like god actually was like, or like the other idea is that like they think it's like a polytheistic religion, like these were all different gods and then fighting over who was like the best god. But like seers are just like, actually it's all the same, but then that kind of makes like so like the royal families feel a bit threatened, so like they don't really like the seers. But like the seers are cool. The seers are very chill people.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to write religion, because it's a world in which there's not really any doubt that a god exists. Like, God exists, but you're fighting over the specifics. It's
like if each royal family thinks that like this god was a very different person, you have to think about like how bad was the character assassination in the books they wrote. Like how badly did they like to misinterpret?
God just isn't very good at writing. I don't know.
Because I haven't really. That's like one of the lore elements I still need to figure out is like what's actually in the books, and it might just be that they're like a collection of like different stories and different morals, kind of like what the Bible is.
Yeah.
And even if those stories aren't specifically about the god, or like the god just features or like as an unseen character, each book might teach like a different moral or like value different themes, which might explain why each royal family perceives the god in a different way, because like they think like, oh, the god values different things than how the god presents in another book.
Like each having one parable, like not to compare it too much to the Bible because it's a completely fantasy world. We don't want to do that. But like each royal family has a chapter in the Bible, a parable in the Bible, but they all go together and they just can't see it.
Yeah.
So there's like, the book of James, the book of Luke, but they're different books. No, they're the same book.
The royal family's like arguing, and then like all of the seers just have like their heads in their hands, just like, you idiots.
It's like a row of jigsaw pieces, and they're like turning them the wrong way, like it doesn't fit.
Because my current idea, because it links into like why Sebastian is like disrespected. Each royal family has the ability to read their specific book. Sebastian couldn't read it. So that's why his whole like lineage is called into question. Yeah. I don't think there's a real reason why he can't read them. I think it's like, just I totally don't think his mum cheated. I think it was totally like a whoops. Something, he was just born without it, and he can't do anything about it, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But then, like, my idea is that, like, seers can innately read all of the books, so all of the royal families are just like, that makes us feel uncomfortable, so we kind of hate you.
May have to murder a few fools, yeah. Ruh-roh. So Sebastian sort of goes on this character journey. Does he accept the fact that he can't read the books, or does he sort of try as hard as he can to read the books?
Because like it's been a defining point in his life, because there's like at least for his royal family, they have like a big ceremony where the new heir is gets to a certain age, is made to read a chapter of a book. He just could not read it, so his younger brother had to they made his younger brother come in, and he could read the book. So like despite Sebastian being older, he's like, everything, his kind of like birthright has all been handed to his like brother, who so like he's been like subject to like a lot of like neglect, and then I guess his like brother's been brought up as like this golden child, which brings its own problems, because even though I don't want his brother to be like a redeemable character, I don't want to be like this character is like 100%. I don't want him to be like absolutely evil, like very one-note evil. I want him to be like, there is a reason why he's like this. I think a lot of bad behaviors or like hate is stuff that's taught or like inherited.
Yeah.
But like in the way that it's like, told down, like a lot of people are racist because that's the community that they've grown up in. They don't know anything that's different, and it's just become so ingrained into that culture. And so I think Sebastian, I think a defining trait of him is that he's never let this kind of make him be bitter. He's very much kind of a doormat, and the stories about him gaining a spine.
Yeah.
But he's always like tried to be very kind to people, but he kind of dwells on the past. He tries to, even though his brother Romeo is like really terrible to him, because that's how like their father has raised him to see Sebastian, because he can't use the magic. Sebastian still tries to see, it still like thinks that there's like some kind of good in Romeo's heart, that he can salvage this relationship.
Yeah.
So I think he's like kind of in a way accepted that he can't do this, but he thinks that, like, you know, maybe people don't hate him in a kind of naive way, but it doesn't work, and a lot of the book is like very much about him like realizing this, or being shown it by other people, and him being able to become strong enough to walk away from just a really bad situation for him.
Yeah. That's a really nice kind of message it's not even that much of a metaphor, because he's in a sort of abusive environment, even if it's fantasy. So does Sebastian, is there ever doubt in Sebastian's mind as to whether he believes in the god that he's supposed to?
That's something like I haven't quite got into in thinking yet, because I think like because I think, like, you know, if he can't read the book, then that means his link to like the god is basically severed. So I think it would probably make him, I guess in a way it could be similar to his relationship with Romeo, where like, so like all the signs say like, oh, this god kind of hates you, you know, you should just like move on, but he sort of like thinks somewhere deep down in his heart that this god does still love him, even though I think like the god is completely, you know, I mean the god is like not around anymore for whatever reason, so like they don't really have an opinion on him, because they can't really have an opinion on anything anymore.
Yeah.
You know, but I think naive, he might think that like, oh, this Sebastian might think like, oh, this god still, you know, cares about me, even though he has like no link to it. Or it could be that he's just accepted, like, I have no connection to this god, there is no real reason for me to have this faith, and he puts his faith more in just like real people, because helping people who are like physically there just makes him feel happier.
There is sort of two routes. Well, it's more than two routes, but two routes you can go down, whereas you don't need the words to feel that there's a god there, and you could go down the path of finding God, but more in yourself, and more in the sense that you can feel that there's definitely something there. Or the fact that everyone believes in a god, and Sebastian literally can't believe in a god, because even though those people that can't read believe in a god, he can't relate to it in the same way, because he was born into this. He was born to be able to read. But yeah, I don't know if the point of your book was to sort of show faith and doubt, but it's a cool sort of thing that's there's sort of an undertone to everything. Is there when everyone else is absolutely certain, you've got your protagonist who's supposed to be certain but really isn't.
Because I guess my main like theme was like the idea of like abuse and neglect, and also like which admittedly aren't really tropes I'm personally like experienced with, but those experiences have resulted in Sebastian very much being an anxious person, which is something, and sort of like sheltering him away from the world because he feels like unworthy, and just, you know, the world has treated him cruelly. That scares him. Why should he go back out there? Which, you know, the idea of anxiety and like growing a spine and becoming more confident are sort of like things I know I have experience with quite intimately. That's sort of like the themes I sort of like see as the forefront. But I do think with the changes I've made to like how religion works on the planet, that so like I think the faith and the doubt idea is a really like interesting thing to explore. Like possibly Sebastian would be like a very good character to explore with, because you know he's the outlier. For everybody else, it's just, you know, normal, like royalty can read the book, everything's fine, everything's suns and peaches. But like I think it's also like another. I think like the whole religious route is one that could also be explored with like a book that has a seer main character, because you know they experience religion, or like have such a different like religion to the way that everybody else perceives it. But even though, you know, they kind of know what's right in the world, really, there's like, you know, everybody else has like a different interpretation of it, and, you know, vilifies them, even though they're, you know, kind of like have a point.
Yeah. So in terms of you've written, sort of writing your novel at the moment, and depending on how long it takes you to get it published, possibly, hopefully, within the next 10 years, possibly. I just want to know a bit more about the extracts that you sent in. What's the sort of, not the whole context for it, but the background context?
So, for like the extract, I think like one of the strongest aspects of the book is the relationship that Sebastian has with his brother, and how it wasn't always like that. Yeah. So for the extract, it's very much about like Sebastian seeing an object that reminds him of the past, and him suddenly like remembering the past, and how much happier he was before he found out that he couldn't like read the book. And how much he had such a nice, like, wholesome, healthy relationship with his brother, and how that's just all kind of ruined now. And even though the extract doesn't 100% show how they are now, I like the atmosphere of the memory, and so like the inherent sadness of it, and like how it hints at like, you know, things aren't the same now, and also how it shows that like Sebastian's very much a person who's like clinging on to the past, as feeble as it is. Yeah. No, I cannot wait. Also it features frogs, so I thought that was a nice thing. Have to get some lovely frog audio clips on freesounds.com. There you go, there's your plug. Audio Jungle. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It sounds like a world that I haven't even skimmed the surface of. And I'm so looking forward to reading it when it comes out. Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Pip Pryor. Thank you. And I'll see you in the extract. Sebastian straightened out his jacket, examining himself in the full-length mirror. He furrowed his brow. The colours were exquisite, all carefully selected jewel tones that would match the life in his cheeks and dazzle in the early summer sunlight. Such a lovely summer too. Why shouldn't he use it as his muse? Each garment was perfectly tailored to fit his physique like a glove, including the pristine jabot, which frills were expertly framed between his lapels and waistcoat, providing his chest with just the right amount of power, like those broad-chested opera singers. But something was missing. He waltzed slightly, revolving to ensure nothing had slipped past his gaze. Oceans of colour, juicy and vibrant like the first fruits of the season, but still pretty, but dreadfully vacant. While the colour blocking ensured no two parts of the ensemble would bleed together, where were the small details to break up the monotony? The conversation starters, those little things the bards of yore would write poems about.
That was it. He opened one of many filigree outlined chests of drawers and pulled out one of many filigree outlined jewellery boxes. Easing it open just a smidge, he frowned. Brooches, yes, but not quite the selection he had in mind. He placed it back. Marisol had recommended that he purchase some jewellery boxes that had windows embedded into the roofs, so that you could see its contents at a glance. And while he certainly saw the practicality of the idea, what about the sun damage? He would rather waste a few seconds each day, picking out the wrong box, than have one of his favourite pieces perish before its time. And his collection of handcrafted pearlescent jewellery boxes matched so well in the drawer. He pulled out an identical box, and lo and behold, it was the right one this time. Speckles of gold glinted in the shadows like eyes. He gently shut the box for protection and sat down on the bed, setting it upon his lap. A golden field opened up in front of him, with gemstone berries blossoming forth, divided into 24 equal plots of velvet soil. He ran a finger down the fences, admiring each piece as he arrived next to it, and imagining what it would look like adorned upon the outfit. A small crystal snowdrop with a thin golden stem, delicate and understated, perfect for wearing alongside another brooch upon the opposite lapel, as its small beauty prevented it from becoming redundant. A particular favourite for afternoon teas, with pastel striped shirts and coats, matching with elegant floral patterns on the teacups, or the arrangement at the centre of the table. Although liable to being easily swamped by bold colours, and the hint of periwinkle in the flower would clash terribly with the warm teal of the blazer. Half a golden pomegranate with ruby seeds, a great tribute to nature's bounty, symbolic of fertility. The vibrant crimson was so fresh and inviting, like pearls of pomegranate juice, refreshingly bold. This one was good for midsummer parties, an outdoors kind of brooch, where the heat and Solaris were given thanks. Definitely a contender. He continued down the columns until he got to the last. Something was tucked away in the top corner. Sebastian fished it out between his fingers and stared right into its scarlet eyes. A frog? A frog, like those he used to fish out of the pond, while my mum would pick apples from the trees, humming folk songs from back home. When Romeo would look up at him, up and not down, grinning, not maliciously, not smugly, simply the grin of a younger brother, with a gap from his last missing tooth. Or that his older brother was so quick and brave with dexterity he hadn't quite grown into yet. He would ask to hold the frog, and Sebastian would let him, although not before reminding him that he must wrap his fingers fully around its midsection and not crush its side, lest he hurt the poor thing. And Romeo would listen, carefully taking the frog from him and giggling at how slippery it was, and how the legs dangled like earrings. Back when life was simple. Sebastian blinked. The noises of the breeze outside and his own breathing returned, and the frog was solid gold again. Gold and ruby red. Movement expertly captured in its outstretched leg. A little vessel for the nostalgia of summers prior. He smiled, his eyes pricking. A perfect brooch for a perfect day. He pinned it onto his lapel.